I spend a lot of time looking at the past because I'm really fascinated by anthropology and trends and historical things. And so I end up, as a byproduct of that, watching a lot of older shows or watching interviews of people, older interviews. And because news and before the internet was so much less accessible, people were a lot more precise about what they would say in interviews because you only had this opportunity to say this once. You didn't have like a social media that you could go home in 1978 and talk about how this tour was, right? It would have to go through the channel of a publication or the channel of something and get released. And so a lot of the times, a lot of the really most interesting stories come from these early interviews or early publications.
Interesting.
And for me, I look at a lot of that stuff and it helps me bring context to something that I might be dealing with in the present. You know, because as a triple minority in what was Trump's America, it's interesting to now see what people, it's interesting for people to now see what I experience on an everyday basis. And not necessarily bad things, but it's more, in my case, micro things, because as a well-dressed black man who is well-spoken, you know, it gives me a whole set of privileges because I'm more of a friendly, palatable black guy. Like, this is a black friend that you can take to, like, meet your parents and stuff, and you won't have these cultural divides because what does he know about the black existence? You know, he's probably, like, a yuppie and doesn't know, and, you know, he's more us than them. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? I'm like, if the cops pull me over, I'm like, it's not really gonna matter. You know, if I'm at a party and there's like gunshots and the cops get called, they're not going to be like, ooh, wait, no, that guy in the vintage Armani, no, surely he cannot be, you know, up to any nefarious activity. So no, don't hurt him. But, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. And so now people realizing, like, man, it is very different for different people. It's kind of a wake-up call. But it's funny that even in that, instead of people responding by going, okay, let's look within ourselves to figure out how we can actually change things and re-narrate the way that we live, they do the opposite. And they look outward, trying to go and, like, you know, scream and yell instead of being like, it takes you. You know, Montrose has changed a lot since I've been here. I've been hanging out in Montrose since like 1997. And I remember back when Avant-Garden was Helios, you know, it was just such a different place. And not because Mariana changed it or anything, but it's like the social consciousness changes. And so that makes everything change along with it. And a lot of my earliest memories were just hanging out at Helios transitioning into Avant-Garden in like the very mid 2000s with like Cam Franklin, you know, and Joffrey Mueller. And one of my favorite memories of Joffrey is me and him on my roads did this like, you know, weird banjo, you know, trade-off thing where he would play some licks and I would mimic those licks, and we went back and forth and we're getting faster and faster. And that's how we kind of became friends, because he's like, yeah, man, you can hang on. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that you could do that on a banjo.
And I totally forgot to mention that you are a musician as well.
Once was, man, I know.
Yeah.
Back in the olden days.
I remember I learned that.
Before you kids came around.
I remember I learned that at your birthday party.
Yeah, no, I did. I played for 10 years, man. I got to play at Fitzgerald's and Rudyard's, and I opened for a lot of really cool people. And
Did you go to university or anything like that?
No, it was a byproduct of growing up in a house with a crazy mom and needing an outlet.
See that? I mean, that's good. That just shows, like, even to this day, you can do what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you put your mind to it.
When you got pressure, you get diamonds. You know.
Yeah, I mean, think about, we always look at success from the end of the byproduct, right? But we don't ever look at the story of how that got there and some of the things that people experience to get there. And that's what makes sometimes some of the most amazing music in times, is that music has always been this thing where I've almost treated it as a form of its own Bible. And if you listen to songs and listen to what people are talking about, you can hear that we've been having the same freaking conversations for the last 100 years. It's like,
More than that.
When the whole early part of the Black Lives Matter movement came on. I'm like listening to all of the early Curtis Mayfield, late Motown, and it's like they were just like, come on, like we're still. It's like that song is more relevant now than it was, 50 years ago. And it's because we as people haven't fully understood how to be people.
We don't remember real good either.
No, but that's because we get distracted, and that's the dangerous part of the internet, is that we get distracted. And so, a long time ago, if a business was not doing good business, let's say you went to the meat market and you'd always kind of like, shiv you on the percentages or whatever, or on what you got, people would stop going there and you go out of business. There was no tolerance for that. And now, because I have a social media platform, I have an opinion, and because I have that opinion and I have 2,000 friends, that means it has some validity, and because it has some validity, that means it's set in stone. And it's like, no, it's not. Wrong is wrong, right is right, and that's what it is. Is there forgiveness in that and redemption? Absolutely, because not every absolute is absolute other than death as we know it and life as we know it. And it begins and ends there. And so I think for me, myself, that's how I've been able to survive all of these times, being 36. I remember, when we were talking about, there was a whole rash of gay bashing in Montrose. I mean, there's always been that, but it was really, really prevalent like 4 years ago. And people were talking about, I got these private messages from some friends, right? And it was kind of in conjunction with one of the first, I think it was Trayvon's murder. And I got some message from some friends, and they were like, oh, I'm so sorry about what's going on. I feel so bad. I feel so bad for my privilege. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, have you ever had a bias towards anybody you've been friends with or with me? And it's like, if that was the case, I wouldn't be friends with you regardless of how nice you were. Because I can read through that, because I've been taught, how to be a bit more perceptive than taking things for face value. And I was like, well, even that same vein, then where were you, me as an early gay kid, in 1998, when these guys from Memorial and Spring would come out in their Bronco and they'd have Louisville Sluggers and they'd go beat the fag out of you. And so we all had to leave the support group that was like hidden in the church in Montrose in groups, because if they got you, man, there was no going on live and seeing the last moments of your life. You were just gone.
Wow.
That's it. You're just gone. There's no cameras everywhere. There's nobody hanging out outside on their phone. It was just a different era of like wild, wild west, because you left your house and you left your house.